Today, my topic of presentation is hypertension in pregnancy, which includes gestational hypertension, preeclampsia, and chronic hypertension. Gestational hypertension. Gestational hypertension is high blood pressure that develops after 20 weeks gestation. Women usually don't have any other symptoms. In many cases, it does not harm mother or baby, and it goes away within 12 weeks after childbirth. But it does raise the risk of high blood pressure in the future. It sometimes can be severe, which may lead to low birth weight or preterm birth. Some women with gestational hypertension do go on to develop preeclampsia. Preeclampsia is a sudden increase in blood pressure after the 20th week of pregnancy. It usually happens in the last trimester. In rare cases, symptoms may not start until after delivery. This is called postpartum preeclampsia. Preeclampsia also includes signs of damage to some organs, such as liver or kidney. The signs may include protein in the urine and very high blood pressure. Preeclampsia can be serious or even life-threatening for both woman and baby. Chronic hypertension. Chronic hypertension is high blood pressure that started before the 20th week of pregnancy or before woman became pregnant. Some women may have had it long before becoming pregnant, but didn't know until they got their blood pressure checked at their prenatal visit. Assessment of gestational hypertension. In women with gestational hypertension, a full assessment should be carried out in a secondary care setting by a healthcare professional who is trained in the management of hypertensive disorders of pregnancy. In women with gestational hypertension, take account of the following risk factors that require additional assessment and follow-up, which includes nulliparity, age 40 years or older, pregnancy interval of more than 10 years, family history of preeclampsia, multi-fetal pregnancy, and BMI of 35 kg per meter square. Treatment of gestational hypertension includes hypertension and severe hypertension. Admission to hospital if any in hypertension, if any clinical concerns. And in severe hypertension, admit the patient if the blood pressure but if blood pressure is less than 160/110 millimeter of mercury, then manage as for hypertension. Antihypertensive treatment given if blood pressure remains greater than 140/90. The medicines include labetalol, nifedipine, and methyl-dopa. And in severe hypertension, offered to all. Targeted blood pressure once antihypertensive treatment started. Hypertensive blood pressure less than 135/85, and in severe hypertension, same. Blood pressure measurement. At least every 48 hours or more frequent if admitted to hospital. And in severe hypertension, every 15 to 30 minutes until blood pressure is less than 160/100, and then for orally. Dipstick proteinuria. In hypertension, only repeated if clinically indicated, and in severe hypertension, same. Timing of birth in gestational hypertension. Do not offer planned early birth before 37 weeks to women with gestational hypertension, whose blood pressure is lower than 160/110 millimeter of mercury, unless there are other medical conditions. And for women with gestational hypertension whose blood pressure is lower than 160/110 after 37 weeks, timing of birth and maternal and fetal indications for both should be agreed between the woman and the senior obstetrician. If planned early birth is necessary, offer a course of antenatal steroids and magnesium sulfate if indicated. Postnatal investigations of gestational hypertension. In women with gestational hypertension who have given birth, measure blood pressure daily for the first 2 days after birth, then at least once between day 3 and day 5th, as clinically indicated if any antihypertensive treatment is changed after birth. In women with gestational hypertension who have given birth, continue antihypertensive treatment if required. Women that the duration of their postnatal antihypertensive treatment will usually be similar to the duration of their antenatal treatment, but may be longer. Reduce antihypertensive treatment if their blood pressure falls below 130/80 millimeter of mercury. If woman has taken methyl-dopa to treat gestational hypertension, stop within 2 days after the birth and change to alternative treatment if necessary. Assessing preeclampsia. Assessment of women with preeclampsia should be performed by a healthcare professional trained in the management of hypertensive disorder pregnancy. Carry out a full clinical assessment at each antenatal appointment for women with preeclampsia and offer admission to hospital for surveillance and any intervention needed if there are concerns for the well-being of the woman or baby. Concerns should include any of the following: sustained systolic blood pressure of 160 millimeter of mercury or higher, any maternal biochemical or hematological investigations that cause concern, for example, a new and persistent rise in creatinine, that is 90 micromole per liter or more, 1 milligram per 100 ml or more, rise in alanine transaminase over 70 international units per liter or twice upper limit of normal range, a fall in platelet count under 150,000 microliter, signs of impending eclampsia, signs of impending pulmonary edema, and other signs of severe preeclampsia. Risk factors: hypertensive disease during previous pregnancy, chronic kidney disease, autoimmune disease, SLE, type 1 or 2 diabetes, pregnancy age greater than 40 years, pregnancy interval greater than 10 years, BMI greater than 35 at first antenatal visit, multi-fetal pregnancy. Treatment of preeclampsia. सर ये सेम ही है जैसे वो मैंने पहले वाले टेबल में बताया था. Time of birth in women with preeclampsia. Less than 34 weeks to 40, continue surveillance unless indication for planned early birth. Offer magnesium sulfate and steroids. At 34 to 36 plus 6 weeks, continue surveillance unless indication. Women considering the option of planned early birth take into account then women's and baby condition, risk factors such as maternal comorbidities, multi-fetal pregnancy. At 37 weeks, initiate birth within 24 to 48 hours. Postnatal investigations, monitoring and treatment. Postnatal investigations, monitoring and treatment includes blood pressure. In women with preeclampsia who did not take antihypertensive treatment and have given birth, measure blood pressure at least 4 times a day while the woman is an inpatient, at least once between day 3 and day 5 after birth, on alternate days until normal. If blood pressure was abnormal on day 3 and 5, give antihypertensive treatment and start. In women with preeclampsia who did not take antihypertensive treatment and have given birth, start antihypertensive treatment if blood pressure is 150 over 100 millimeter mercury or higher. Ask women with preeclampsia who have given birth about severe headache and epigastric pain each time blood pressure is measured. For women with preeclampsia who have taken antihypertensive treatment and have given birth, continue antihypertensive treatment. Consider reducing antihypertensive treatments if their blood pressure falls below 140 over 90 millimeter of mercury. Reduce antihypertensive treatment if their blood pressure falls below 130 over 80. If a woman has taken methyl dopa to treat preeclampsia, stop within 2 days after the birth and change to an alternative treatment if necessary. Hematological and biochemical monitoring. In women who have preeclampsia with mild or moderate hypertension or after a step down from critical care, measure platelet count, transaminase, serum creatinine within 48 to 72 hours after birth or step down. Do not repeat platelet count, transaminase, or serum creatinine measurement if results are normal at 48 to 72 hours. If biochemical and hematological indices are outside the reference range in women with preeclampsia who have given birth, repeat platelet count, transaminase, and serum creatinine measurement as clinically indicated until results return to normal. In a woman with preeclampsia who have given birth, carry out urinary reagent strip test 6 to 8 weeks after the birth, and offer a woman who had preeclampsia and still have proteinuria 1 plus or more than at 6 to 8 weeks after the birth a further review with the general practitioner or specialist at 3 months after the birth to assess kidney functions. Chronic hypertension. Hypertension present at the booking visit or already taking any hypertension medicine when referred to maternity services can be primary or secondary in etiology. Pre-pregnancy advice in chronic hypertension. Refer to a specialist to discuss risk and benefits of treatment. Those taking ACE inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers advise increased risk of congenital abnormalities. Discuss alternative anti-hypertension treatment if find out pregnancy on ACE inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers. Stop them preferably within two working days of notification of pregnancy. Those taking thiazides, diuretics, advise an anti-hypertension treatment other than ACE inhibitors, angiotensin receptors, or thiazides like diuretics. Limited evidence. Treatment of chronic hypertension. Advise maximum exercise, healthy eating, lowering salt, sustained systolic blood pressure less than 110 or sustained diastolic blood pressure less than 70. If systolic blood pressure greater than 140 or diastolic blood pressure greater than 90, consider labetalol. Then nifedipine if labetalol not suitable. And if both are not suitable, then methyldopa. Offer aspirin 75 into 150 milligram OD from 12 weeks. Timing of birth in chronic hypertension. Don't deliver before 37 weeks, regardless of treatment, unless other medical indications. After 37 weeks, whether on treatment or not, agreement between the woman and senior obstetrician if planned early birth necessity. Offer steroids and magnesium sulfate if indicated. Postnatal care in chronic hypertension. Measure blood pressure from day 0 to second day. On day 3rd and 5 at least once as clinically indicated. And if anti-hypertension treatment changes after birth, aim for if blood pressure is less than 140 over 90, not greater than 150 over 100 as during pregnancy. Continue anti-hypertension treatment if required. Offer a review of anti-hypertension treatment 2 weeks postnatal with the general practitioner or specialist. Methyldopa stop within 2 days after birth and change to an alternative anti-hypertension treatment. Thank you.
ऑनलाइन जी और पार्टिसिपेंट्स
कमेंट्स वगैरह वाला सेक्शन सब वो कमेंट्स वाला सेक्शन जो होता है ना
हां इधर ऑनलाइन वाला कर Any questions? Comments? Question वाला भी एक सेक्शन होता है।
बॉक्स बना ना नीचे
क्या
ये इसको क्लिक करें
आप में से किसी के सवाल कमेंट्स
एक्सक्यूज मी सर मेरा एक क्वेश्चन है सीवियर प्रीएक्लेम्शिया की कैटेगरी जो है सीवियर हाइपरटेंशन सीवियर प्रीएक्लेम्शिया उसमें इसकी डेफिनेशन और उसकी तरह डिफरेंस बता दे प्लीज मतलब क्या मेन डिफरेंस क्या है
सीवियर प्रीएक्लेम्शिया की क्या व्हाट आर द फीचर्स ऑफ सीवियर प्रीएक्लेम्शिया
ब्लड being headache
हैं
so in severe preeclampsia
वो impending हो गया ना severe preeclampsia or impending eclampsia is more or less the same previously it used to be mild moderate and severe preeclampsia and severe preeclampsia was more or less synonymous with what was called at that time impending eclampsia nowadays the categorization is between preeclampsia we don't use the terms mild or moderate so it is preeclampsia or then the severe preeclampsia. You are right in what you say that what are the criteria of severe preeclampsia? These are when the blood pressure is 160 by 110 or more than that, or there is severe proteinuria like more than 3+ on qualitative and on quantitative it is more than 300 milligram in a 24-hour urine specimen. Or then there are other criteria also. If the serum creatinine is raised, if the platelet count is low, and similarly if the liver function, liver enzymes, particularly AST and ALT, they are more than double the normal or baseline levels. If these are, and or also uric acid to some extent, but uric acid does not necessarily becomes a prognostic factor, but it is generally said for 5.4, more than 5.4 uric acid is also part of that. And in addition, these are the investigations, or these are the other features, but she said, Sarish has rightly said, that if the patient starts feeling headache, there is blood vision, there is epigastric pain, which again are symptoms related to the effects of severe hypertension. There are cerebral effects, there are effects because of the liver capsule being stretched too much, and headaches and blood vision are because of the cerebral effects of hypertension and edema. And difficulty in breathing, that can also be there. So those are the presenting features. In addition, if it is found that the blood pressure is 160 by 110 or higher than that, and on investigations, those are the parts of the investigations which will then form the basis of this. And if you would now, these are the criteria which will show that there is the severity of hypertension. I'll go through some of my slides quickly. Yeah, all right, I'll go through my slides. Am I audible? All right, if there is no
जी
response,
सर आ रही है, आपकी आवाज आ रही क्लियर.
all right. Now, these are the various types of hypertensive disorders which are related to pregnancy, as has already been said. Gestational hypertension, which is the one that appears only in pregnancy, chronic hypertension, preeclampsia, and superimposed. Gestational hypertension has these features. It develops for the first time during pregnancy, and a blood pressure of 140 by 90 or more than that qualifies it to be labeled as hypertension. According to 2017 definition of hypertension of American Heart Association, any blood pressure which is more than 130 by 80 is considered to be treatable or warrants treatment. But in gestational hypertension, essentially there is no proteinuria as such. And the other feature, of course, is that it returns back to normal 12 weeks after pregnancy. It is rightly said that the definition or the final diagnosis obviously would be made after that period when the blood pressure spontaneously comes back to normal, that it was the pregnancy which had induced this hypertension. This probably is the least common types of blood pressure problems in pregnancy. Chronic hypertension, the same criteria, but in this case, mostly the diagnosis of blood pressure would have made before the pregnancy's onset, or it may be diagnosed obviously for the first time that the patient has had the chance of having some medical consultation. And the blood pressure, raised blood pressure is present before 20 weeks. You see, if blood pressure is raised or found to be high before 20 weeks, there are two possibilities. Either the patient has chronic hypertension, or it's a molar pregnancy or gestational trophoblastic disease, as it is said, because preeclampsia does not develop before 20 weeks of pregnancy. So hypertension first diagnosed after 20 weeks gestation and persistent after 12 weeks of postpartum is again chronic hypertension. So this is how you differentiate between gestational hypertension and chronic hypertension. And then is preeclampsia. It has
Say some visual slide behind. So कोई definition before 20 weeks जो होता है वो माना होता है ना
Gestation.
chronic hypertension जो before 20
chronic या gestational hypertension, chronic hypertension. Yes.
So after 20 weeks होगा वो फिर pregnancy
उसमें you don't know. It may be preeclampsia, it may be chronic hypertension, it may be gestational hypertension. The diagnosis will be made 12 weeks afterwards. If it persists, then it is chronic hypertension. If it is accompanied with proteinuria, it is preeclampsia. And if it disappears after 12 weeks or within 12 weeks postpartum, then it was gestational hypertension. So this is how you would differentiate between these three. And okay, I am on my next slide. So how frequently?
We assess quantification of proteinuria during pregnancy.
No, actually, you see, at every visit you should test the urine according to the book. We generally do not do that. But if you read guidelines, particularly NICE guidelines of 2019, or the RCOG recommendations, because now RCOG generally refers you to NICE guidelines, where it is recommended that urine should be tested for green dipstick test at every visit. More or less now, hemoglobin and urine is generally to be done at every visit. This is testing of protein in urine is part of the antenatal assessment. Like we do the abdominal examination, we measure the blood pressure. Similarly, urine should be tested for proteins at every visit. In my clinical practice, I don't do it. We generally look at the blood pressure, we generally look at the growth of the baby and all that. And maybe after a little while, in certain practices, one can justify, for example, I can justify why I did not test the urine at every visit, because I do ultrasound at every visit, which is not recommended for general assessment of the pregnant woman on each and every visit. What you do in each and every visit is you palpate the abdomen, look at the height of fundus, assess to some extent clinical assessment of the amount of Hyper. You are asking for 24 hours. Well, that is done initially to assess the severity of the disease. If the blood pressure was 160 by 110, and if the blood pressure by antihypertensive treatment comes down within the normal limits, then and the rest of the criteria are okay, then you don't do 24-hour urine routine. You then only bank on qualitative assessment of urine. You can't continue doing it all the time. So I suppose that answers your question. And then we go to preeclampsia. The definition is 140/90 blood pressure, which is after 20 weeks plus proteinuria, which is important. That is a component of preeclampsia. And if there are accompanying fits, as we call them, then it is eclampsia. And this is superimposed preeclampsia on chronic hypertension. So new onset of proteinuria. There wasn't proteinuria, but there was raised blood pressure, and that would be superimposed. And sudden increase in proteinuria or blood pressure or a platelet count of less than 100,000 millimeters in a woman with hypertension. So these are the criteria in which you would say that it is superimposed preeclampsia. Now, this is the definition of proteinuria. It is 300 milligrams of proteins in a 24-hour urine collection, or protein in milligram per deciliter oblique creatine in milligram per deciliter ratio, which is greater than or equal to 0.3, or urine dipstick protein of 1 plus if a quantitative measurement is unavailable. So 24-hour urine collection is not something which is comparatively easy, which may not be always available, and therefore these are the various criteria or measures by which you can assess the presence of proteinuria. And serial confirmation 6 hours apart increases the predictive value. This is regarding dipstick method. So if you find that there is 1 plus or 2 plus proteinuria on dipstick, then you repeat it after 6 hours. And if you find that it still is there, then it is all the more convenient. A urine dipstick value of 1 plus or more, which is equivalent to 30 milligram, is not reliable in the diagnosis of proteinuria per se. But if you repeat it and it is present, or if there has previously been an assessment of 24-hour urine collection, then it of course gives you some prognostic value. Help you know about this, what it is. Then preeclampsia, ये भी आ गया, पहले हो गया है. Up now, this we need to realize that it's a disease which is very still. It is ill understood why it happens. You know, I started reading about preeclampsia in 1975. 1976, not 75. And till now, we still are nowhere near understanding its reason. And even at that time, it used to be called, the eclampsia or preeclampsia used to be called a disease of Curies. So much so that some people also hypothesized that it has got something to do with the magnetic fields of the earth, and if the patient is put in a north to south position, etc., etc. I mean, that kind of approach to assessment. I'll tell you about it in a little while also. And this also tells you about how much frequent it is. Generally, the incidence of preeclampsia is said to be about 4% overall. And even in the developed countries, this is one of the important causes of maternal morbidity and mortality, even in developed countries. Because hypertension is there and it will have its effects. Once you start treating it, then the implications again are, if you bring down the blood pressure, that is only for the mother. You do not really improve the perinatal mortality or morbidity with that, because the blood pressure or the underlying disease process is still there. We'll see it in a little while. And this gives about the figures globally that we have. And of course, in developing countries or countries with low resources, like low and middle income countries, the incidence and the consequences of this disease are higher. Globally, the incidence of preeclampsia 5 to 14% of all pregnancies, US में 2 to 6% है, और developing world में थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा है. And this is the second most common obstetric cause of stillbirth and early neonatal death in the low middle income countries. This is defined as presence of, that is, systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressures, at least on 2 occasions 4 hours apart, or again systolic blood pressure of more than that, that is severe preeclampsia and proteinuria. We have already gone through this. This is the preeclampsia with severe features. This was the question that I was initially asked. It is blood pressure of 160 systolic or more than that, or 110 or higher diastolic, again on 2 occasions 4 hours apart, and severe persistent upper quadrant or epigastric pain. That again is because of the expansion of the liver capsule. Impaired liver function, which is demonstrated by abnormally elevated blood concentration of liver enzymes to double the normal concentration of ALT and AST. Progressive renal insufficiency, which is demonstrated by serum creatinine of more than 1.5 milligrams. New onset cerebral or visual disturbances, pulmonary edema, which will be manifested by difficulty in breathing, and low platelet count of less than 100,000. So progressive renal ये हो गया. Eclampsia is defined. Development of fits which cannot be attributable to other causes in a woman with preeclampsia. Now, I really wondered about this. How many times we come across a patient of severe preeclampsia and if she starts developing fits, we generally do not rule out any other causes. We just label it preeclampsia. That's what we do. And of course, there can be this HELLP syndrome may complicate severe preeclampsia. Now, this is interesting. What are the mechanisms how preeclampsia develops? Hypertension may be one of the common features which presents, but this is not the essentially the underlying problem. Underlying problems are different. वो जो मैं कह रहा था ना कि it has been a disease of hypothesis. ये अगली 3 स्लाइड्स में आपको इससे पता चलेगा थोड़ा सा. आगे से इधर हाँ, डिली का आपने नाम सुना होगा. जोसेफ डिली was a distinguished obstetrician in America. If you look at American literature, वो अपने लोगों को पढ़ा के पेश करेंगे, and if you look at British literature, वो और करेंगे. ये अगली स्लाइड में आप देखोगे कि किस तरह से वो है. सर ये शिकागो का एक हॉस्पिटल है, काफी मशहूर है, वो दिल्ली ने बनाया था. And then he placed at that time there 5 stone वो plaques उसने बनाए थे, और उसमें distinguished जो थे उसके ख्याल में obstetricians of in history उनके नाम लिखे थे, लेकिन उसमें 4 नाम उसने लिखे थे, और 5वां दरमियान वाला स्टोन जो है वो उसने छोड़ दिया. वो 4 नाम जो उसने दिए, अब ये उन्होंने जैन पल्फिन का नाम लिखा हुआ है फॉर इंट्रोड्यूसिंग ऑब्स्टेट्रिक फोर्सेप्स. अगर आप ब्रिटिश लिटरेचर देखें तो वो कौन सी फैमिली को कहते हैं, वो नाम लो जरा. ऑब्स्टेट्रिक फोर्सेप्स किसके नाम कहा जाता है? नो, चलो जाके ढूंढना आज. अगर जो those who are with us on net, they can write the name. British inventor of forceps. And then Von Deventer, who discovered obstetric and anatomical disorders. They are contracted as a Chamberlain कहा जाता है, Chamberlain family who introduced forceps into, वो जाके देखना उसकी. William Smelly इसके साथ ये for improving the design of the forceps is Austrian, और वो जो ब्रीच के लिए भी बोला जाता है Maurice Smelly wheat maneuver, जो जिसको और दूसरा नाम क्या है इसका? और इससे उसमें लिविन मैनूवर एक होती है, ये ब्रीच में इस्तेमाल होती है. And Eduardo Foro for introducing hysterectomy. तो उन्होंने कहा कि जी according to legend, the fifth stone plaque in the center, which is still blank today, is reserved for the scientist who discovers the cause and cure of preeclampsia. So it still is. और वो देखोगे 1930s में से लेके अब तक 90 साल हो गए और ये डिजीज है और इसकी अभी तक हमें वजह नहीं पता चली. लेकिन the mechanisms behind this problem are attributable to, अब ये आ जाओ, मैं स्लाइड को पूछ रहा हूँ, ये हाँ हाँ. So ये important factors हैं, immunological factors on the part of the mother, abnormal placental implantation, genetic, nutrition and environmental, ये तकरीबन सब में आ जाते हैं. ये genetic, nutritional वाले जो हैं तो आप लगा सकते हो, और cardiovascular and inflammatory changes. अब immunological factors में से निकल के हम ये देख लें, because you see 50% this immunological factors also are thought to play some part in gestational trophoblastic disease, because 50% of the conceptus has its genetic material from the father and 50% is from the mother, and the natural reaction would be to reject it, to push it out and not accept it. So this is a mystery why actually how does this 50% of maternal origin tissues are accepted by the body, and those mechanisms are complex. I personally don't have any intuition of that, and I don't understand them completely how they do that, because they relate to immunology. But there are these natural killer cells in the uterus, and there is an interaction of those with fetal human leukocyte antigen, and then in these cases there is seen in the placental bed histological changes similar to those seen in acute graft rejection. So there are abnormalities of trophoblastic invasion. ये यहाँ से अगर आप देखोगे इस स्लाइड में खास तौर पे, तो normally what happens is that this is the cytotrophoblast, which is part of the fetus, and this is the placental bed here, and then we see the uterine arterioles. This is a uterine arteriole which has been invaded by, वहाँ पे नहीं आ रहा ये, हाँ ये आप अगर देखो तो उसमें ये जो येलो वाला हिस्सा है, yellow, that is cytotrophoblast, and then on the right side if you see there are arrows, that's a uterine arteriole which has been invaded by cytotrophoblast that transforms its endothelial cells of the uterine arteriole, and because of that उधर से थोड़ा तो invade deciduous media of maternal spiral arteries and replace its endothelial in the process called pseudomuscularization. And because of that, there is resultant expansion of those arterioles. And as not only expansion, that becomes a pool, a lake of blood. So instead of a narrow arteriole, वो pool of blood हो जाता है, which is, you can see in the lower two diagrams. On the left side, that's the non-pregnant arteriole, and on the right side, in a normal pregnancy, as the cytotrophoblast, that whitish and bluish thing that is invading it, that causes expansion of the arteriole area, which is invaded by the cytotrophoblast, and because of that, there is abundance of maternal blood available in which the cytotrophoblast and the placental villi will be bathing. On the contrary, if you look at this, अब फिर उसमें आएगा तो मैं कहूँ कि वहाँ पे वही है स्लाइड आ रही है. Now in this case, if you compare it with the previous one, the arteriole has not expanded as much. And in the lower three diagrams, if you see the non-pregnant and then the normal pregnancy one, and then on the right side, there is abnormal pregnancy in which the arteriole has failed, or the cytotrophoblast has failed to invade it, or the arteriole did not respond to that sense, and there it remained kind of constricted or not expanded, because of which the same kind of blood supply, nutrition, etc. is not available to the fetus. And here in this diagram, you can see normal and preeclampsia invasion of the trophoblast of the arterioles and the expected changes which occur or in the normal pregnancy and those which do not take place in this abnormality, which ultimately can lead to preeclampsia. And this is the cascade of events that happen. So there is incomplete trophoblastic invasion of the spiral arteries. You knew it from the previous diagrams, and because of that, there is placental hypoperfusion because the arterioles haven't expanded and that results in release of systemic vasoactive components, and then they lead to this long chain of events, exaggerated inflammatory response that leads to vasoconstriction, endothelial damage, capillary leak, edema, इस तरह से होता है, and hypercoagulability and platelet dysfunction, and this results ultimately in organ dysfunction and various clinical features of the disease. So this is how the whole cascade of the disease process in preeclampsia goes on. Genetic factors, well, they are still under study, and there are a host of genetic factors which are paternal, maternal genes which have been implicated in that, and they appear to play some role in vascular diseases, BP regulation, diabetes, etc., or immunological functions. They are still under study. So genetic factors surely are there. So we have looked at immunological factors. Immunological factors are the immunological response of the mother to the tolerance or rejection of maternal, paternal component of the conceptus. So उस तरह से और genetic factors में एक और चीज, if you look at it, that 20 to 40% of daughters, it is seen in those women who have had preeclampsia, their daughters are more likely to develop it. The incidence is higher in sisters, and similarly, twins have again twin girls, identical twins, more likely they have a higher predilection of developing preeclampsia. और वो उसमें ये खासतौर पे unlikely that any single gene will be shown to play a dominant role, because it is a very complex genetic and phenotypical disease. So there would be surely more than one gene which will be responsible for that. And if you look at the genetic approach of management and treatment, in which you can kind of slice out or take out a gene or add something to modify the genetic response of that still will not be possible, because this is something which is still under experimentation, and in some cases it has become available. For example, this new pill that Merck has introduced for treatment of COVID-19, which is molnupiravir, which is an antivirus treatment. What that does is that genetically alters the structure of the virus, so that it does not, it cannot continue to divide in its present form as it is doing. So that is kind of genetic approach to treatment of a disease. So similarly, here you cannot really do that, because that's likely to not only be dependent upon one gene, but more than one gene. And then these are, those other factors, वो जो जिसको आप बोलोगे हिस्ट्री में आ जाते हैं या environment में आ जाते हैं. For example, nulliparous women are 3 to 1 3 times more likely to suffer from preeclampsia compared to multiparous women. If a woman is older than 40, like, and a woman who is more than 40 years, she is also, and black or a brown race 1.5 times, family history 5 times, and chronic renal disease 20 times more than chronic hypertension, antiphospholipid syndrome. So, and look at homozygosity for angiotensinogen gene T235. Now, this is one gene. If that is homozygously present, that increases the chance 20 times. And if there is heterozygous implication of that gene, the chance is about 4 times. So there is that genetic basis. In addition, of course, there are influences of other diseases which make someone more predisposed to develop preeclampsia. I think that we'll take up discussion of the case next time. और आज तो हो गया पूरा टाइम. We'll go with this topic. ठीक है? स्टार्ट करते हैं. चलें जी. हम करें. अब मैं 10 मिनट लूँगा. All those who are with us on the net, please have your questions ready for the next time, and also your suggestions. I quickly go through these slides. I have gone through about 30 slides of my presentation. Total नहीं वो ज्यादा है, वो उतनी नहीं है, वो थोड़ी सी वो नहीं वो 111 नहीं है, वो दूसरा है ऐसा. तो वो 10-15 स्लाइड्स और हैं. We'll take that up and we'll also discuss some case and also take your questions about this. ठीक है जी, हमें ऑफ कर दें. अब मैं थोड़ा सा लेकिन उसको
जी अस्सलाम सर. सर आपका माइक अनम्यूट कर लें.
हेलो
जी सर अब आ रही है आवाज.
क्यों जी, शुरू करूं?
जी सर. डॉक्टर अवैस.
डॉक्टर अवैस साहब, गुड मॉर्निंग टू यू.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर.
यार तेरी आवाज घट आ रही है, जरा ऊंचा बोलो.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर. अब ठीक है?
मेरा ख्याल में माइक कनेक्ट कर. अब बोलिए।
जी सर।
अब बेहतर होगी। चलो,
जी सर।
आपके प्रेजेंटेशन से पहले 2-3 बातें मैं कर।
जी सर।
पहली बात तो आपका शुक्रिया कि आप मान गए प्रेजेंटेशन पे, और हालांकि मैंने इनसे कहा था कि अगली दफा तुम प्रेजेंट करना, लेकिन ये भी भाग गया था, इसको मनाना पड़ा। आप लोगों में से 5-6 लोगों ने टॉपिक्स भेजे और एक ने लंबी हिस्ट्री भेजी। हमने कहा जो लंबी हिस्ट्री वाली जो हैं उनकी बात मान लेते हैं। जब उनको कहा कि जी आप प्रेजेंट कीजिए, शी चिकन आउट के मैं तो, मुझे मसरूफियत निकल आई है, मैं तो नहीं प्रेजेंट कर सकती उसने। फिर वो जिन्होंने टॉपिक्स भेजे थे उनसे कहा गया एक एक करके। मेरे सेक्रेटरी इमरान शफी ने टेलीफोन किया तो वो भी कि जी मेरी तो तैयारी नहीं है, मैं मंडे को बताऊंगी, मेरा ये मेरा वो। बात यह है कि आप लोगों को एक तरह से सबको, कोई एक एक्सेप्शन शायद हो, तो आप लोगों को फोबिया है हिस्ट्री प्रेजेंटेशन का। हालांकि मैंने तो पिछली दफा लेक्चर खत्म किया था तो मैंने कहा था आप सब केस भेजो, आई ट्राई टू अकोमोडेट एवरीबडी। तो भेजे 5 जितने टॉपिक्स भेजे और एक ने हिस्ट्री भेजी, बाकी उन्हें तो भेजा ही नहीं। आपको एक तरह से खौफ है प्रेजेंटेशन का। हालांकि ये तो एक ऐसी अपॉर्चुनिटी है जो आपको खुद ही अवेल करने की कोशिश करनी चाहिए। यू शुड जंप एट द अपॉर्चुनिटी इंस्टेड ऑफ जंपिंग एट इट, यू चिकन आउट। इनका है मैं आई वांट टू प्रेजेंट, आप भेज दीजिए इमरान शफी को अपना नाम, टॉपिक, हम जरूर आपको अकोमोडेट करेंगे जिन्होंने भी भेजा आपको। लेकिन मैं आपके जनरल फोबिया की बात कर रहा हूँ कि आप ना वार्ड में प्रेजेंट करते हैं ना क्लासरूम में प्रेजेंट करते हैं। आपको मनाना पड़ता है, ड्यूटी लगानी पड़ती है, अगली दफ़ा तुमने प्रेजेंट करना है। वो फिर पूरा हफ्ता नर्वस रहती है कि ओ मेरी प्रेजेंटेशन आ गई, मेरी प्रेजेंट। आप तो ऐसे होना चाहिए कि बिल्कुल रिलैक्स रिलैक्स। आप घर बैठे हैं, प्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं, कोई आप पे हंस रहा है, कोई कुछ कह रहा है, आपको तो पता ही नहीं। तो इससे बेहतर अपॉर्चुनिटी आपको कहाँ मिलेगी? क्योंकि क्लासरूम में, वार्ड में, कोर्स में प्रेजेंट करने में तो 10-20 लड़कियां बैठी सुन रही होती हैं। आपको खौफ होता है। खौफ क्या है कि मैं गलत ना बोल दूं। बाबा यहाँ गलत बोलोगे तो करेक्ट हो जाएगा, उसका कोई नुकसान नहीं होगा, आपको फायदा हो जाएगा, आपकी मिसकंसेप्शन ठीक हो जाएगी। वेयर एज इम्तिहान में गलत बोलोगे वो उसका रिजल्ट है विच यू डोंट वांट। तो इसलिए ये एक ऐसी अपॉर्चुनिटी है, मेरे पास ही नहीं, जहां पे भी आपको अपॉर्चुनिटी मिले कि जी प्रेजेंटेशन, यू शुड जंप एट इट, मेक बेस्ट ऑफ इट।